Welcome to the China Angle. I'm Simone Gao. In just under 2 years, China's relations has grown sour with Canada. In that time, several Canadian citizens have been sentenced to death over drug-related charges. Is China finally taking steps to help crack down on international drug trade? Or is China taking revenge on Canada for not kowtowing to the communist regime? What are the implications for the safety of the United States and the Western world in general? We'll go into this and more in today's China Angle. Last week, China sentenced 2 more Canadians to death. Since 2019, China has sentenced 4 Canadians to death in total, all on drug-related charges. Let's quickly review who they are and what they were charged for. On August 7th, China sentenced Ye Jiahui to death for manufacturing and transporting drugs. The court did not release specific details on what drugs or how much was made. 1 day earlier, China sentenced the Canadian citizen Xu Weihong to death. The court similarly gave no details. However, local media said Xu had gathered ingredients and tools to make ketamine in October 2016. He produced and stored the product in his house. Reports said the police confiscated 265 pounds of ketamine. On April 30th, China sentenced the Canadian defendant Fan Wei to death. He allegedly manufactured and sold more than 140 pounds of methamphetamine between July and November 2012. An online court statement said, in the same case, a U.S. citizen as well as 4 Mexicans were given suspended death sentence or life in prison. And finally, China sentenced the Canadian citizen Robert Schellenberg to death on January 14, 2019. He was accused of attempting to smuggle 485 pounds of methamphetamine from China to Australia in 2014. He appealed his case in December 2019. The court ordered a retrial, which lasted only 1 day. His sentence was changed from 15 years in prison to death. So we can see that China has taken a clear stance on cracking down on Canadians involved in the drug trade. But what has triggered all these drug-related arrests? One thing to keep in mind is that just before the harsh sentencing began, Canada arrested a Chinese citizen on December 1st, 2018. Not just any citizen, but the CFO of one of China's largest tech companies. That company is Huawei, and the person is Meng Wanzhou, daughter of the company's founder. Huawei is one of the largest producers of smartphones and network equipment. It is also a pet company of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. It's worth noting that the U.S. blacklisted Huawei in May 2019 for security reasons. The U.S. has also encouraged the Western nations to avoid accepting new 5G technology from Huawei for similar security concerns. Just recently, on August 7th, the tech giant has stated that it can no longer procure chips for its high-end smartphones. U.S. sanctions forbade the company from selling these chips to Huawei that's used to make those phones. 50% of Huawei's entire revenue comes from consumer products, such as smartphones and computers. This sanction is a half-death sentence to Huawei. What did the communist regime do in response? On Huawei's case, they didn't do anything. The CCP recently put sanctions on 11 American officials, including lawmaker Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. That is a supposed direct retaliation against the U.S. sanctions of the Chinese officials who played roles in human rights abuses in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. But those sanctions against the American officials really don't mean anything, since these people do not have assets or bank accounts in China, nor do their families go to China for education or business. The punishment is for show only. But the CCP's retaliation against Canada is different. Here's what they did after Meng Wanzhou was arrested. After Meng was arrested in Canada, the United States requested her extradition. The reason is she allegedly violated sanctions on doing business with Iran. Huawei actively worked to cover up those connections. According to internal documents leaked in June, Meng has been under house arrest in Canada since then. In May, Canadian courts denied her bid for freedom and decided to continue the extradition case. After her arrest, China demanded her release. The CCP also warned Canada of serious consequences if she was not released. What serious consequences? Just over 1 week after Meng's arrest, China initiated its revenge by arresting 2 Canadians inside China. Their names are Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. In the following month, the CCP began restricting Canadian imports to China. One telling example was canola oil, as China is the largest consumer of canola oil. Other Canadian agricultural products began running into issues as well, like peas, soybeans, and pork. Meanwhile, we started to see more Canadian citizens who were accused of spying activities were sentenced to death for drug dealings in China. This is not to say these Canadians must be innocent, but their alleged crimes were certainly used by the CCP to punish and tame the Canadian government. Even the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said so. On June 22nd, a spokesman for China's foreign ministry told Mr. Trudeau to stop making irresponsible remarks. This came after Trudeau said Beijing's decision to charge 2 Canadian citizens with spying was linked to Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Here, we're not suggesting the CCP is treating America better than Canada. Not at all. The Chinese Communist Party views America as its #1 enemy. But when they know they cannot threaten or tame President Trump, they choose other ways to compromise America. One of them is to wage a drug war against America. One of the biggest players in the United States opioid epidemic is China. For most companies that are able to produce medicines, they can also produce illicit drugs. That includes both precursors and final products. We all know that China is dominant in making chemical precursors to all sorts of medicines. The pandemic has pointed out that reality. In fact, the Chinese regime has been working with cartels in Mexico and South America to sell illicit drugs to buyers inside the United States. Former head of the Drug Enforcement Administration Derek Maltz said this: "Clearly, the Chinese are way more dangerous, way more sophisticated, way more complex, and way more of a national security threat to America. It is not even a comparison with Mexican cartels." As far as illicit drugs go, China may be best known for its fentanyl production and distribution. Fentanyl is a highly potent synthetic opioid. It can be 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. It is cheap to make, and just 2 milligrams can be fatal. Chinese producers have sent fentanyl to the U.S. directly by mail. Of course, Mexican cartels can also produce fentanyl. However, these cartels still highly rely on Chinese precursors. The Mexican cartels also distribute for China. In August 2019, the Mexican Navy intercepted a 25-ton shiploads of fentanyl originated from China and bound for Culiacan, Sinaloa, the home base of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. In the 90s and 2000s, China was already setting up large-scale imports of chemicals to Mexican drug cartels. According to Maltz, one Chinese importer was arrested in Maryland in 2007. $205 million in cash was found in his residence. It's something that most would only imagine on television. Maltz emphasized that the man was just an individual case, and he earned this money only through chemical sales, not finished products. That is to say, there may be even worse offenders out there. Coincidentally, drug warfare is one of China's espoused methods of subverting a nation without fighting. 2 Chinese colonels outlined this strategy in a book called Unrestricted Warfare. So that is to say, China experienced the Opium Wars in the past, and it is well in the process of facilitating a new one in the West. That brings us back to the main topic. If drug charges are really at the heart of these Canadians being sentenced to death, why would China also allow so many fentanyl and meth producers to poison the United States? The regime has the power to clamp down and eliminate most anyone it wants inside its borders, as evidenced in Tibet and Xinjiang. So why not systematically remove the drug makers? Is it because some of them are helping the CCP achieve its goals of ruining America? Let's go back to Canada. I believe it is crucial for Canada to see the Chinese Communist Party as is. As suggested in the book on restricted warfare, there's really nothing off the limit for the regime. When the current Chinese leader abandoned his predecessor Deng Xiaoping's strategy, hide your capability and bide your time, there are really only two ways left in terms of how the party acts. To enemies who are more powerful than China, they wage covert wars to grind it down internally. For countries who are weaker than China, the CCP openly harass and bully them if they don't toe the party line. Freedom is at risk. This has been the China Angle. I'm Simone Gao. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.